The morning sun cast long shadows across the rugged terrain of the Afghan mountains as Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez adjusted his binoculars for the third time. His weathered hands gripped the equipment tightly as he scanned the valley below, searching for any signs of movement. The 75th Ranger Regiment had been deployed to this remote outpost for 6 months, and every day brought new challenges in their fight against insurgent forces. Rodriguez had seen it all during his 12 years of service. He had witnessed young soldiers break under pressure, experienced veterans make fatal mistakes, and countless missions that seemed impossible become routine through sheer determination and training. But nothing had prepared him for what he was about to witness on this seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning in March. The radio crackled to life, breaking the silence that had settled over their position. Alpha Base, this is Overwatch. We have movement in Sector 7. Single individual, appears to be civilian, moving toward your location. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, their commanding officer who was monitoring the situation from the main base several miles away. Rodriguez lowered his binoculars and turned to his team. Corporal Danny Martinez, a 24-year-old from Texas, was cleaning his rifle with the methodical precision that had kept him alive through 3 tours of duty. Private First Class Kevin Thompson, barely 21 and still relatively new to combat operations, was checking his ammunition for the 4th time that morning. The newest addition to their unit sat quietly against a large boulder, seemingly unbothered by the tension that filled the air. This newest member was not what anyone expected when they heard a replacement was coming. Sarah Chun was 18 years old, standing barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, with a slight frame that made her look even younger than her actual age. She had joined the military straight out of high school, much to the surprise of her family and friends who knew her as a quiet, studious girl who preferred books to sports and spent most of her free time at the local library. When Sarah first arrived at the outpost 2 weeks earlier, the reactions from the seasoned Rangers were exactly what one might expect. Rodriguez remembered the moment clearly. The helicopter had touched down in a cloud of dust and debris, and as the rotors slowed, everyone expected to see another battle-hardened soldier step out. Instead, they watched as this tiny figure emerged, carrying a standard-issue rifle that looked almost comically large in her small hands. "That's our replacement," Martinez had whispered to Thompson, his voice filled with disbelief. "She looks like she should be in high school, not in a combat zone." Thompson had nodded in agreement, his own doubts clearly visible on his face. How did she even make it through basic training? And Ranger School? This has got to be some kind of mistake. The skepticism wasn't limited to the enlisted men. Even Rodriguez, despite his years of experience and training in military leadership, found himself questioning the decision to send someone so young and seemingly fragile to one of the most dangerous areas of operation. He had requested her service record, hoping to find something that would explain why she had been assigned to their unit. What he found was both impressive and puzzling. Sarah Chun had scored in the top 5% of her class in marksmanship training. Her scores in tactical planning and strategic thinking were equally impressive. She had completed every phase of training ahead of schedule and had received commendations from multiple instructors. On paper, she was exactly what their unit needed. In person, she looked like she could be blown over by a strong wind. During her first week at the outpost, Sarah had remained largely silent. She followed orders without question, completed her assigned tasks efficiently, and kept to herself during downtime. The other Rangers had given her space, partly out of respect, and partly because they simply didn't know how to relate to someone who seemed so out of place in their world of violence and constant danger. The radio crackled again, pulling Rodriguez back to the present moment. "Alpha Base, civilian is approximately 2 clicks from your position and closing. Maintain observation, but do not engage unless threatened." Rodriguez raised his binoculars again and quickly located the figure Harrison had spotted. A lone person was indeed making their way across the rocky terrain, moving with surprising speed and confidence for someone navigating such treacherous ground. At this distance, it was impossible to determine if the individual was armed or posed any immediate threat. "Martinez, Thompson, take positions on the East Ridge," Rodriguez ordered quietly. "Chun, you're with me on Overwatch. Keep your eyes open and your finger off the trigger unless I give the word." As they moved into position, Rodriguez noticed something he hadn't paid attention to before. Despite her small stature and quiet demeanor, Sarah moved with a fluid grace that spoke of excellent training and natural athletic ability. She handled her rifle with confidence, and her eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, taking in every detail of the terrain and potential threats. The approaching figure continued to move closer, and through his binoculars, Rodriguez could now make out more details. It appeared to be a young man, possibly in his 20s, wearing traditional Afghan clothing. He carried what looked like a walking stick, but Rodriguez's trained eye noted that the man's movement patterns suggested he might be carrying additional equipment. "Something's not right about this," Rodriguez muttered to himself, though Sarah heard him clearly. "The walking pattern is wrong," she said quietly, speaking up for the first time during the entire morning. "He's favoring his right side, but not because of an injury. There's additional weight there." Rodriguez turned to look at her, surprised by the observation. He raised his binoculars again and studied the approaching figure more carefully. Sarah was absolutely right. The man's gait suggested he was carrying something heavy on his right side, something he was trying to conceal. "Good eye," Rodriguez acknowledged, his respect for the young soldier beginning to increase slightly. "What do you think he's carrying?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, continuing to observe through her own scope. "Based on the weight distribution and the way he's trying to compensate, I'd guess it's a rifle. Probably an AK-47 or similar. The question is whether he's planning to use it or just carrying it for protection." The radio crackled again. "Alpha Base, we're picking up additional movement in the area. Multiple contacts, approximately 1 kilometer south of your position. Be advised, this may not be a lone civilian." Rodriguez felt the familiar tightness in his chest that always preceded combat. After 12 years of military service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were telling him that this situation was about to become very dangerous very quickly. He looked at Sarah, this young woman who had been thrust into their world of violence and uncertainty. In a few minutes, she might face her first real combat situation. He wondered how she would react when the theoretical training became deadly reality. Would she freeze up like so many soldiers did during their first firefight? Would her small size and apparent fragility become liabilities that could get them all killed? Rodriguez keyed his radio. "Copy, Overwatch. We're in position and maintaining observation. We'll report any changes in the situation." As he set down the radio, Rodriguez made a mental note to keep a close eye on Sarah during whatever was about to unfold. He had seen too many young soldiers make fatal mistakes during their first taste of real combat, and he was determined not to let that happen on his watch, regardless of his initial doubts about her capabilities. The approaching figure was now less than 800 meters away and still closing. In the distance, Rodriguez could see dust clouds that suggested more people were moving in their direction. Whatever was about to happen, they would soon find out exactly what kind of soldier Sarah Chun really was. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything Rodriguez thought he knew about combat, courage, and the surprising places where heroes could be found. The tension in the air became thick enough to cut with a knife as the lone figure continued his approach toward their position. Rodriguez could feel sweat beginning to form on his forehead despite the cool mountain air. Through his binoculars, he watched as the man suddenly stopped and appeared to be scanning the rocky outcroppings where the Rangers had taken position. "He knows we're here," Rodriguez whispered into his radio. "Martinez, Thompson, report your status." "In position, Sergeant," came Martinez's immediate response. "We have a clear view of the target and the surrounding area. Still no visual on those additional contacts Overwatch mentioned." Rodriguez glanced at Sarah, who remained perfectly still beside him, her rifle trained on the approaching figure. What struck him most was her complete lack of visible nervousness. Most soldiers, especially those facing their first potential combat situation, would show some signs of stress. Rapid breathing, slight trembling, constantly adjusting their grip on their weapon. Sarah displayed none of these telltale signs. She appeared as calm and focused as if she were on a training exercise back at base. The radio crackled with Harrison's voice from Overwatch. "Alpha Base, we now have confirmation of multiple hostiles moving in your direction. Count is at least 6 individuals, possibly more. They appear to be using the lone individual as a distraction while they maneuver into flanking positions. Rodriguez felt his heart rate increase. This was exactly the kind of situation that had claimed the lives of too many good soldiers. A seemingly simple observation mission was rapidly evolving into a complex tactical scenario with multiple threats approaching from different directions. "Sean," he said quietly, "how are you feeling about your first potential firefight?" Sarah never took her eyes off her target as she responded. "I'm ready, Sergeant. I've run scenarios like this dozens of times in training. The principles remain the same regardless of whether the targets are paper or people who are trying to kill you." Rodriguez was struck by the matter-of-fact tone in her voice. There was no bravado, no false courage, just a simple statement of readiness that suggested either exceptional preparation or dangerous naivety. He hoped it was the former. The lone figure suddenly raised his right hand, and Rodriguez could see sunlight glinting off what appeared to be a metallic object. "Signal mirror," he reported into his radio. "Target is communicating with someone. This confirms we're dealing with a coordinated attack." Almost immediately after the signal was sent, the sound of gunfire erupted from the south. Martinez's voice came through the radio, tense but controlled. "Contact south. Multiple targets engaging from concealed positions approximately 600 meters out. We're taking accurate fire." Rodriguez made a quick tactical decision. "Thompson, move to support Martinez. Chun, you're with me. We're going to advance on the primary target before he can coordinate a more effective attack." As they began to move, Rodriguez couldn't help but notice how smoothly Sarah transitioned from a static observation position to tactical movement. She kept low, used available cover effectively, and maintained proper spacing to avoid presenting a group target. Her movements were economical and purposeful, showing none of the wasted motion typical of soldiers still learning to apply their training in real-world situations. The lone figure below had now produced what was clearly an assault rifle and was scanning the rocks above him, trying to locate their position. Rodriguez estimated the range at approximately 300 meters, well within the effective range of their weapons, but requiring precise shooting in order to neutralize the threat quickly. "Chun, can you make that shot?" Rodriguez asked, though he was already fairly certain of her answer based on her service record. "Yes, Sergeant. Clean shot, center mass, 300 meters. Wind is minimal, no significant elevation compensation required." Rodriguez was about to give the order to fire when the radio erupted with urgent communications from Martinez and Thompson. "Taking heavy fire. These guys know what they're doing. Professional movement, coordinated fields of fire. This isn't a random insurgent attack." The sound of incoming rounds striking the rocks around their position confirmed that they had been spotted by the primary target. Rodriguez could hear the distinctive crack of rifle rounds passing close to their heads. It was time to act decisively. "Take the shot," he ordered. What happened next would remain burned into Rodriguez's memory for the rest of his military career. Sarah's rifle fired once, the sound sharp and clean in the mountain air. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez watched as the distant figure suddenly stumbled, spun halfway around, and collapsed onto the rocky ground. "Target down," Sarah reported in the same calm tone she had used throughout the entire engagement. Rodriguez was amazed not just by the accuracy of the shot, but by the complete absence of any emotional reaction from Sarah. She had just taken her first life in combat, something that affects even the most experienced soldiers, yet she appeared as composed as if she had just completed a routine training exercise. "Outstanding shot," Rodriguez acknowledged. "Now we need to move to support Martinez and Thompson." As they repositioned to engage the remaining threats, Rodriguez found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about the young soldier beside him. The girl who had looked so out of place when she first arrived at their outpost had just demonstrated a level of skill and composure that would have been impressive in a veteran soldier with multiple combat tours. The firefight with the remaining insurgents continued for another 20 minutes, but the tactical situation had changed dramatically with the elimination of the primary target, who had apparently been coordinating the attack. Without central coordination, the remaining attackers became increasingly disorganized and eventually withdrew from the area. When the shooting finally stopped and the area was declared secure, Rodriguez took a moment to observe Sarah's reaction to her first combat experience. Many soldiers experience a wide range of emotions after their first firefight: relief, excitement, nausea, or even delayed shock. Sarah appeared thoughtful, but otherwise unchanged from the soldier who had been quietly observing through her scope just an hour earlier. "How do you feel?" Rodriguez asked, genuinely curious about her mental state. Sarah considered the question for a moment before responding. "I feel like we accomplished our mission successfully with minimal risk to our unit. The training prepared me well for the tactical aspects. The emotional components are manageable." Rodriguez found himself both impressed and slightly concerned by her response. The level of emotional control she displayed was remarkable, but it was also unusual for someone so young and inexperienced. He made a mental note to keep observing her reactions over the coming days and weeks. Martinez and Thompson rejoined them as they prepared to return to base. Both men looked at Sarah with new respect and no small amount of amazement. "Did you really take out that target with a single shot at 300 meters?" Martinez asked. "Yes," Sarah replied simply, offering no elaboration or apparent pride in the accomplishment. Thompson shook his head in disbelief. "I've been doing this for 3 years, and I'm not sure I could have made that shot under those conditions." "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My grandfather taught me to hunt when I was 12, Sarah explained. "He was a Korean War veteran and believed that if you're going to carry a rifle, you should be able to use it effectively. I've been shooting regularly for 6 years. As they walked back toward their base, Rodriguez reflected on the morning's events. The young woman who had seemed so out of place just hours earlier had not only proven herself capable in combat, but had potentially saved all their lives with her exceptional marksmanship and tactical awareness. He realized that he needed to fundamentally change his assessment of what made an effective soldier. Size, age, and appearance meant nothing compared to training, skill, and mental toughness. Sarah Chun possessed all 3 qualities in abundance, despite looking like she belonged in a college classroom rather than a combat zone. The radio crackled one final time as they approached their base. "Alpha Base, this is Overwatch. Outstanding work out there. Initial intelligence suggests you disrupted a planned attack on our main supply convoy. Your actions likely saved American lives today." Rodriguez looked at Sarah, who received this information with the same calm composure she had shown throughout the entire operation. He was beginning to understand that they had gained much more than just another soldier when she joined their unit. They had gained a weapon of exceptional precision and effectiveness, one that happened to come in a very unexpected package. Word of Sarah's remarkable performance spread through the base camp faster than wildfire in dry grass. By evening, soldiers from other units were finding excuses to walk past their area, hoping to catch a glimpse of the 18-year-old who had made a perfect 300-meter shot during her first combat engagement. The story had already grown in the telling, with some versions claiming the shot was made at 500 meters in heavy wind and rain. Rodriguez found himself fielding questions from officers and enlisted personnel throughout the day. Captain Williams from Bravo Company stopped by their tent during the evening meal, his curiosity barely concealed behind a facade of casual conversation. "I heard you had some excitement this morning," Williams said, settling down beside Rodriguez with his dinner tray. "Word is your new soldier performed exceptionally well." Rodriguez glanced over at Sarah, who was eating quietly while reading what appeared to be a technical manual about advanced rifle maintenance. She seemed completely unaware of the attention her actions had generated, or perhaps she simply chose not to acknowledge it. "She did her job," Rodriguez replied carefully. "Made a clean shot when it was necessary. No more, no less." Williams lowered his voice slightly. "Come on, Mike. A perfect center mass shot at 300 meters during active combat? On her first day under fire? That's not just doing her job. That's exceptional performance by any standard." Rodriguez nodded slowly. He couldn't argue with Williams' assessment, but he also didn't want to contribute to the growing legend that was forming around Sarah. In his experience, too much attention could be harmful to young soldiers, potentially affecting their judgment or creating unrealistic expectations for future performance. "She's well trained," Rodriguez acknowledged. "Time will tell how consistently she can perform under different conditions." That night, as the camp settled into the routine of evening security checks and equipment maintenance, Rodriguez found himself observing Sarah more carefully than usual. She cleaned her rifle with the same methodical precision she applied to every task, checking each component thoroughly before reassembling the weapon. Her movements were economical and efficient, showing none of the nervous energy typical of soldiers who had just experienced their first combat. Martinez approached their area, carrying a cup of coffee that was probably his fourth or fifth of the day. "Sergeant, can I ask you something about Chun?" Rodriguez looked up from his own equipment maintenance. "What's on your mind?" Martinez glanced around to make sure Sarah was out of earshot before continuing. "Is it normal for someone to be that calm after their first kill? I mean, I've seen experienced guys have strong reactions after taking a life, even in clear self-defense situations. She acts like nothing happened." It was a valid observation, and one that had been troubling Rodriguez as well. While he was impressed by Sarah's tactical performance, her lack of any visible emotional response was unusual and potentially concerning. "Everyone processes these experiences differently," Rodriguez replied, though privately he shared Martinez's concerns. "Some soldiers have immediate reactions, others don't show any effects until weeks or months later. We'll keep an eye on her." The next morning brought new challenges that would test not only Sarah's shooting skills, but also her ability to adapt to rapidly changing tactical situations. Intelligence reports indicated that insurgent activity in their sector had increased significantly following the previous day's engagement. Rather than being deterred by their losses, the enemy forces appeared to be escalating their efforts to disrupt coalition operations. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison called Rodriguez to a briefing at 0600 hours, along with the senior non-commissioned officers from the other units stationed at their outpost. The mood in the briefing tent was serious as Harrison outlined the latest intelligence. "Gentlemen, we have credible information that insurgent forces are planning a major attack on our position within the next 48 hours, Harrison began, pointing to a detailed map of their surrounding area. "Intelligence suggests they're bringing in fighters from outside our immediate area of operations, including some with advanced training and equipment." Rodriguez studied the map carefully, noting the various approach routes that enemy forces might use. The outpost was positioned defensively, but there were still multiple avenues that determined attackers could exploit if they were willing to accept significant casualties. "Sir, what are our rules of engagement for this operation?" asked Sergeant First Class Johnson from Charlie Company. "Standard ROE applies," Harrison replied. "Positive identification required before engagement, but given the intelligence about the planned attack, we're authorized to take preemptive action against any armed individuals approaching our position in a threatening manner." Harrison turned to Rodriguez specifically. "Mike, I'm particularly interested in your new soldier's capabilities. Based on yesterday's performance, I'm considering assigning her to a specialized role for this operation." Rodriguez felt a mixture of pride and concern. While Sarah had certainly proven herself capable, the idea of placing additional responsibility on someone so new to combat operations made him uncomfortable. "Sir, what kind of specialized role are you considering?" "Long-range reconnaissance and precision fire support," Harrison explained. "We've identified several observation points where a skilled marksman could provide early warning and potentially disrupt enemy movement before they can establish effective firing positions." Rodriguez understood the tactical value of Harrison's proposal, but he also recognized the risks involved. Such an assignment would place Sarah in an isolated position where she would be dependent entirely on her own skills and judgment. "Sir, she's only been in country for 2 weeks. Is it wise to give her that level of independent responsibility so soon?" Harrison nodded, acknowledging Rodriguez's concerns. "Under normal circumstances, I would agree with you completely. However, her performance yesterday suggests exceptional capabilities, and our current situation may require us to make use of every tactical advantage available to us." After the briefing, Rodriguez walked back to his unit's area in deep thought. He found Sarah performing her morning equipment checks with the same thorough attention to detail she applied to every task. Her rifle was disassembled on a clean cloth, each component being inspected and cleaned individually. "Chun, I need to discuss a potential assignment with you," Rodriguez began, settling down beside her. "Command is considering placing you in a specialized role for an upcoming operation. Sarah continued working as she listened, but Rodriguez could see that he had her complete attention. What type of assignment, Sergeant? Long-range reconnaissance and precision fire support. You would be positioned at an isolated observation point, providing early warning about enemy movement and engaging high-priority targets as opportunities present themselves. Sarah finished reassembling her rifle before responding. What would be the approximate engagement ranges and expected duration of the assignment? Rodriguez was impressed by the practical nature of her questions. Rather than asking about the dangers involved or expressing concerns about operating independently, she was focused on the tactical requirements of the mission. Engagement ranges from 400 to 800 meters, possibly longer depending on the specific targets. Duration could be anywhere from 12 to 72 hours, depending on how events develop. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I'm comfortable with those ranges and time frames. My equipment is properly zeroed for extended range shooting, and I have sufficient ammunition and supplies for a 3-day operation. Rodriguez studied her face carefully, looking for any signs of nervousness or uncertainty. He found none. If anything, Sarah appeared more focused and alert than usual, as if the prospect of increased responsibility energized rather than intimidated her. Chun, I need to ask you something directly, and I want an honest answer. Do you feel ready for this level of responsibility? Operating independently in a combat environment with minimal support? Sarah met his gaze directly, her expression serious but confident. Sergeant, I've been preparing for exactly this type of mission since I entered military training. The skills required are within my capabilities, and I understand the importance of the mission to our unit's safety. Yes, I'm ready. Rodriguez found himself believing her completely. Despite her youth and limited experience, Sarah possessed a level of confidence and competence that was remarkable. More importantly, her confidence appeared to be based on realistic self-assessment rather than inexperience or overconfidence. All right, Rodriguez decided. I'll recommend to the lieutenant colonel that we proceed with the assignment. But I want to be clear about something. If at any point during the operation you feel uncertain about your situation or your ability to complete the mission, you call for support immediately. There's no shame in asking for help when you need it. Understood, Sergeant. I'll maintain regular communication and request support if the tactical situation requires it. As Rodriguez watched Sarah continue her preparations, he realized that his concerns about her readiness were gradually being replaced by confidence in her abilities. The young woman who had seemed so out of place when she first arrived was rapidly proving herself to be exactly the kind of soldier their unit needed in this dangerous and unpredictable environment. The pre-dawn darkness felt heavy and oppressive as Sarah made her final equipment checks before moving to her assigned observation position. Rodriguez watched her methodical preparations with growing respect and admiration. Every piece of equipment had been tested, every ammunition magazine had been counted and inspected, and every aspect of her mission had been reviewed and rehearsed. Remember, you have a clear extraction route if things go bad, Rodriguez reminded her one final time. Don't try to be a hero. Your job is to provide intelligence and precision fire support, not to single-handedly defeat an entire enemy force. Sarah adjusted the straps on her pack and checked her radio one last time. Understood, Sergeant. I'll maintain my position and provide support as long as tactically feasible. If the situation becomes untenable, I'll withdraw using the predetermined route. Rodriguez handed her an additional battery for her radio. Good hunting, Chun. We'll be monitoring your frequency continuously. Sarah moved out into the darkness with the silent efficiency of a seasoned professional, despite having only 2 weeks of actual combat experience. Rodriguez watched until her small figure disappeared among the rocky outcroppings, then returned to his own preparations for the coming battle. The observation position Sarah had been assigned was a natural hide among large boulders approximately 800 meters from their main defensive perimeter. It provided excellent fields of fire across the most likely enemy approach routes, while offering good concealment and multiple escape options. The position had been used successfully in previous operations, though never by someone as young and inexperienced as Sarah. As the first light of dawn began to illuminate the mountain landscape, Sarah settled into her hide and began the patient work of long-range observation. Through her rifle scope, She could see for kilometers across the rugged terrain, watching for any signs of movement that might indicate approaching enemy forces. Her radio crackled softly with routine check-ins from the main base. Overwatch, this is Alpha Base. Radio check, over. Alpha Base, this is Overwatch. Loud and clear. No movement observed at this time. Continuing observation. The hours passed slowly, but Sarah remained alert and focused. She had learned during her training that successful reconnaissance required extraordinary patience and attention to detail. A moment of inattention could mean missing a critical piece of intelligence that might cost American lives. At approximately 1,030 hours, Sarah detected the first signs of enemy movement. Through her scope, she could see what appeared to be two individuals moving carefully among the rocks approximately 1,200 meters from her position. They were too far away for positive identification, but their movement patterns suggested tactical awareness and military training. Alpha Base, this is Overwatch. I have possible hostile contact, bearing 270 degrees, range approximately 1,200 meters. Two individuals moving tactically through the rocks. Rodriguez's voice came back immediately. Copy, Overwatch. Maintain observation and report any changes in the situation. Over the next 30 minutes, Sarah watched as the number of visible enemy personnel gradually increased. What had started as 2 individuals became 4, then 6, then 8. They were clearly conducting a reconnaissance of their own, studying the American defensive positions and probably planning their attack routes. Alpha Base, Overwatch. Contact has increased to 8 individuals, possibly more. They appear to be conducting reconnaissance of our positions. Recommend we consider this confirmation of the planned attack. Copy, Overwatch. Continue observation. Do not engage unless you receive a direct threat to your position. Sarah continued to watch as the enemy force gradually revealed itself. Through her scope, she could see that these were not the typical insurgent fighters they usually encountered. These men moved with discipline and coordination that suggested professional military training. Their equipment appeared to be of higher quality than usual, and they were using sophisticated tactical communication methods. At 1,145 hours, the tactical situation changed dramatically. Sarah observed the enemy force splitting into 3 separate groups, each moving toward different approach routes that would allow them to attack the American position from multiple directions simultaneously. Alpha Base, this is Overwatch. Enemy force is splitting into 3 groups of approximately 4 to 6 individuals each. They're moving to establish multiple attack positions. This appears to be the beginning of their assault. Rodriguez's response was immediate. Copy, Overwatch. You are cleared to engage targets of opportunity. Priority targets are anyone carrying heavy weapons or anyone who appears to be in a leadership role. Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly as she transitioned from passive observation to active combat operations. Through her scope, she began to systematically evaluate each visible enemy fighter, looking for the highest priority targets. Her training had emphasized the importance of target prioritization in complex tactical situations. Leaders, heavy weapons operators, and communications personnel represented the most valuable targets because their elimination would have the greatest impact on enemy effectiveness. Through her scope, Sarah identified what appeared to be a team leader in the northernmost group. He was carrying what looked like an advanced radio and was clearly directing the movement of the other fighters in his group. Range to target was approximately 900 meters, well within her effective engagement range. Sarah controlled her breathing and settled into a stable shooting position. The wind was minimal, and the lighting conditions were excellent. She aligned her crosshairs carefully, accounting for the slight upward angle and the extended range. Her rifle fired once, the sound echoing across the mountain landscape. Through her scope, she watched as the target collapsed immediately, struck center mass by her bullet. The remaining members of his group immediately scattered, seeking cover among the rocks. Alpha Base, this is Overwatch. 1 target eliminated. Enemy forces are now aware they're under observation and fire. The tactical situation rapidly escalated as the enemy forces realized they were being engaged by a sniper. Rather than withdrawing, however, they began to actively search for Sarah's position while continuing to advance toward the main American defensive line. Sarah identified her second target in the central group, a fighter carrying what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. The elimination of this target was critical because such weapons could cause significant casualties among the American defenders. The range was approximately 700 meters, and the target was moving between cover positions. Sarah would need to time her shot carefully to engage the target during the brief moments when he was visible. She tracked the target's movement pattern, predicting where he would appear next. When the fighter emerged from behind a large boulder, Sarah was ready. Her second shot was as precise as her first, striking the target before he could bring his weapon to bear on the American positions. Second target eliminated, Sarah reported calmly. RPG threat neutralized. The remaining enemy fighters were now actively seeking Sarah's position, and she could see muzzle flashes as they began to fire in her general direction. Most of their shots were ineffective at such long range, but Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before they were able to coordinate a more effective response to her presence. Through her scope, she identified a third high-priority target in the southern group. This individual appeared to be coordinating radio communications, probably calling for additional support or trying to organize a more systematic attack on the American positions. Sarah's third shot eliminated this target as well, but by now the remaining enemy fighters had a general idea of where the sniper fire was coming from. Bullets began to strike the rocks around Sarah's position with increasing accuracy. Alpha Base, this is Overwatch. I'm taking incoming fire. 3 targets eliminated, but remaining hostiles are zeroing in on my position. Request permission to relocate. Negative, Overwatch. Maintain your position as long as possible. Your fire is extremely effective and is disrupting their entire attack plan. Sarah understood the tactical importance of her position, but she also recognized that her situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. The enemy fighters were now actively coordinating their efforts to suppress her position while continuing their advance toward the main American defensive line. Despite the incoming fire, Sarah continued to engage targets of opportunity. Her fourth shot eliminated another fighter who had been attempting to establish a heavy machine gun position. Her fifth shot struck a target who appeared to be trying to flank her position. By now, the enemy attack had been significantly disrupted. What had started as a coordinated assault by a professional military unit had degenerated into a confused and disorganized advance by scattered individuals. Sarah's precision fire had eliminated their leadership and key weapons, fundamentally changing the tactical balance of the engagement. However, her own situation was becoming critical. The volume of incoming fire was increasing, and she could see that several enemy fighters were working their way closer to her position. Soon, she would face the difficult decision of whether to continue providing fire support or withdraw to avoid being overrun. The incoming fire intensified as Sarah maintained her position, bullets striking the rocks around her with increasing frequency and accuracy. Through her scope, she could see 3 enemy fighters working their way systematically toward her observation post. Using tactical movement techniques that confirmed these were well-trained professional soldiers rather than typical insurgent forces. Alpha Base, this is Overwatch. I have 3 hostiles advancing on my position from the east. Range is now down to 400 meters and closing. I can continue to provide fire support, but my extraction window is rapidly closing. Rodriguez's voice came through her radio, tense but controlled. Overwatch, what's your assessment of the overall enemy situation? How many hostiles remain combat effective? Sarah quickly scanned the battlefield through her scope, conducting a rapid but thorough assessment of the tactical situation. Her accurate fire had eliminated 5 key targets, and the remaining enemy fighters appeared disorganized and confused. Alpha Base, I count approximately 6 to 8 hostiles still combat effective, but they've lost unit cohesion. No visible leadership remaining, and their advance has stalled. However, the 3 moving on my position are organized and determined. Copy, Overwatch. Continue engagement as long as tactically feasible. We're dispatching a team to support your extraction, but they won't reach your position for at least 15 minutes. Sarah understood the implications immediately. She would need to hold her position and continue providing fire support for at least another 15 minutes while 3 professional soldiers worked their way closer to her hide. The tactical mathematics were not encouraging, but Her training had prepared her for exactly this type of situation. She identified her next target among the main enemy force, a fighter who appeared to be trying to rally the scattered remains of their unit. The range was approximately 850 meters, requiring precise calculation for bullet drop and wind compensation. Sarah's sixth shot struck the target's center mass, and she watched through her scope as the last organized resistance among the main enemy force collapsed. The remaining fighters began to withdraw, apparently deciding that the cost of continuing the attack had become too high. Alpha Base, main enemy force, is withdrawing. 6 targets eliminated. However, I still have 3 hostiles advancing on my position from approximately 300 meters. Rodriguez's response carried a note of genuine concern. Outstanding work, Overwatch. Can you engage the 3 advancing on your position? Sarah shifted her attention to the immediate threat. Through her scope, she could see the 3 fighters moving with professional skill, using available cover effectively, and advancing in a coordinated manner that would make them difficult targets. They were now close enough that she could see their faces clearly. The lead fighter was approximately 250 meters away and would soon be close enough to effectively engage her position with small arms fire. Sarah calculated the range and wind conditions, then settled into her shooting position for what might be her most challenging shots of the day. Her 7th shot struck the lead fighter, stopping his advance permanently. The remaining 2 fighters immediately took cover, but Sarah had observed their positions carefully and knew where they were hiding. The 2nd fighter attempted to move to a different position, exposing himself briefly as he crossed a small open area. Sarah's 8th shot eliminated him before he could reach his intended cover. The 3rd and final fighter had witnessed the fate of his companions and was now trapped behind inadequate cover, unable to advance or withdraw without exposing himself to Sarah's rifle. For several minutes, neither fighter moved, creating a tactical stalemate that could only be resolved when one of them made a mistake. Sarah's radio crackled with an update from Rodriguez. Overwatch, support team is approximately 5 minutes from your position. Can you maintain your current situation until they arrive? Affirmative, Alpha Base. 1 hostile remaining, suppressed behind inadequate cover approximately 150 meters from my position. I have him contained. Sarah continued to observe the remaining fighter's position through her scope, waiting for any opportunity to complete the engagement. Her ammunition supply was adequate, but she was conscious of the need to conserve rounds in case the tactical situation changed unexpectedly. The trap fighter made his final mistake by attempting to use a small handheld mirror to observe Sarah's position without exposing himself. The reflected sunlight gave away his exact location and, more importantly, provided Sarah with a precise aiming point. Her 9th and final shot of the engagement eliminated the last immediate threat to her position. Sarah immediately began preparing for extraction, collecting her equipment, and ensuring that no sensitive materials would be left behind. Alpha Base, this is Overwatch. All immediate threats neutralized. 9 targets eliminated total. Preparing for extraction. Rodriguez's voice carried unmistakable pride and amazement. Copy, Overwatch. Support team will be at your position in 2 minutes. Outstanding performance. As Sarah waited for the extraction team, she conducted a mental review of the engagement. 9 precision shots at ranges from 150 to 900 meters, all successful, all under combat conditions with incoming fire. The tactical impact had been decisive, transforming what could have been a serious threat to their base into a scattered and defeated enemy force. The extraction team arrived exactly on schedule, led by Martinez and Thompson. Both men looked at Sarah with expressions of amazement and respect that had replaced their initial skepticism completely. 9 confirmed kills, Martinez asked as they began moving back toward the base. All precision shots at extended range. 9 targets eliminated, Sarah confirmed, using the more professional terminology that her training had emphasized. Ranges from approximately 150 to 900 meters. Thompson shook his head in disbelief. I've been doing this for 3 years, and I've never seen anything like that performance. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Sarah considered the question as they walked. Combination of natural ability, excellent training, and favorable conditions. Good lighting, minimal wind, and targets that moved predictably. When they reached the base, Sarah found herself surrounded by soldiers from multiple units, all wanting to hear details of her engagement. The story had spread throughout the camp with remarkable speed, and she was already being regarded as something approaching a legend. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison debriefed her personally, reviewing every aspect of the engagement in detail. His questions were thorough and professional, but Sarah could see the amazement in his eyes as she described each shot and its tactical impact. Soldier, in 22 years of military service, I have never seen a more effective individual performance in combat, Harrison told her after the debriefing was complete. Your actions today undoubtedly saved American lives and demonstrated the highest standards of military professionalism. Rodriguez found Sarah later that evening, conducting her routine equipment maintenance with the same methodical attention to detail she applied to every task. Her rifle was completely disassembled, and she was cleaning each component thoroughly despite having performed the same routine just that morning. How do you feel? Rodriguez asked, genuinely curious about her mental and emotional state after such an intense combat experience. Sarah continued working as she considered the question, satisfied with the tactical outcome. 9 targets eliminated with 9 rounds expended represents efficient use of ammunition and effective application of training. The enemy attack was disrupted with minimal risk to our personnel. Rodriguez was struck once again by her matter-of-fact approach to what had been an extraordinary combat performance. He had witnessed experienced soldiers struggle emotionally with far less challenging situations, yet Sarah appeared as composed and focused as ever. Chun, you realize that what you accomplished today was exceptional by any standard? 9 precision shots under combat conditions, all successful, all at extended range. Most soldiers never get the opportunity to demonstrate that level of skill, let alone achieve it. Sarah paused in her cleaning routine and looked directly at Rodriguez. Sergeant, I was trained to be an effective soldier. Today I was able to apply that training successfully in a combat environment. I performed within my capabilities and achieved the mission objectives. That's what I'm here to do. Rodriguez found himself smiling at her response. The young woman who had seemed so out of place when she first arrived at their outpost had not only proven herself capable of exceptional performance, but had maintained the professional attitude and emotional stability that marked the very best soldiers. Over the following days, word of Sarah's performance spread far beyond their small outpost. Military personnel throughout the region had heard about the 18-year-old soldier who had single-handedly disrupted an enemy attack with 9 precision shots. Some versions of the story claimed she had eliminated 12 targets. Others said 15, but those who had been present knew that the actual performance had been impressive enough without embellishment. Rodriguez watched as Sarah adapted to her new reputation with the same calm competence she applied to every other aspect of military life. She neither sought attention nor avoided it, simply continuing to perform her duties with the same dedication and professionalism that had characterized her service from the beginning. The Rangers who had initially questioned her presence among their ranks now regarded her with a combination of respect, admiration, and genuine affection. She had proven that effectiveness in combat had nothing to do with size, age, or appearance, and everything to do with training, skill, and mental toughness. As Rodriguez reflected on the transformation in his unit's dynamics and his own changed perceptions, he realized that Sarah Chun had taught them all an important lesson about the dangers of making assumptions based on first impressions. The young woman who had looked so out of place among the hardened Rangers had turned out to be exactly what their unit needed when they needed it most.